Hi, everyone. I see that people are continuing to join us. That's fantastic. Great to see all of you. So welcome to the 8th Ulrich virtual program that accompanies the Ulrich Artists in You Community Billboard Project. I'm Leslie Brothers, director of the Ulrich Museum of Art, and I'm here with my colleague, Jana Irwin, head of education, and our esteemed guest, Jaune Quick-to-See Smith. The billboard featuring Jaune's work is located at 703 North West Street. I hope that all of you have had a chance to see the 18 billboards currently on view around the city. If you haven't, you can find them in a slideshow on our website under current exhibitions. There you'll also find a map with locations, a link to the portal where all the artworks featured so far are identified and described, information on the Smartify app, and Jed Bodwin's curated playlists on Spotify, which are intended to enhance your billboard viewing experience. We thank our individual sponsors, and I see many of you out there. Thanks so much for supporting this project. We also thank our lead sponsors, Mike and Dee Michaelis and Emprise Bank, the Kansas Creative Arts Industries Commission, which awarded us funding from the National Endowment for the Arts, and Humanities Kansas. And before I introduce Jaune, I just want to invite all of you, if you're not already, to become a free member of the Ulrich Museum of Art. Just go to our website, find the Join Give dropdown, and fill out the very simple short form and receive weekly communications from us, announcements, publications, and much more. So we hope to see you there. We are honored and pleased to welcome as tonight's speaker, Jaune Quick-to-See Smith, who is joining us from her home in New Mexico. Jaune is a highly regarded and decorated painter and multimedia artist in the world of contemporary American art. And she's a towering figure in the community of artists, which she has helped to establish and gain acknowledgement since the 1970s. We're very sorry that University of Kansas art professor Norman Akers, who was originally going to participate in this conversation with Jaune, could not be with us tonight for personal reasons. But I did want to note that when Norman wrote to us to let us know he couldn't participate, he wanted to make sure that we knew how deeply Jaune is admired and appreciated by him and other Native artists for her abundant generosity of spirit and influence. Jaune was born on the Flathead Reservation in Montana and is an enrolled member of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. She received her bachelor's in art education from Framingham State College in Massachusetts and her MFA from the University of New Mexico, where before joining to first organize fellow students and exhibit work nationally in order to combat the program's prejudice against admitting Native students into the painting program. Since her first solo exhibition in 1978, Jaune has been part of dozens of shows, including ones at the Whitney Museum of American Art and the Metropolitan Museum of Art, as well as numerous university art museums, a connection I hope she might talk about tonight. Her work is held in at least 7 dozen museum collections in the US and Europe, including the Ulrich Museum. Earlier this year, she made headlines in the art press when one of her canvases became the first painting by a Native artist to be acquired by the National Gallery of Art in Washington, DC. This, I think, mostly says a lot about the National Gallery's historical collecting priorities, but it is also an acknowledgement of Jaune's artistic stature. Tonight, Jaune will discuss her work spanning the last 30 years. At around 6:45, we'll open the digital floor up for questions from the audience. And please type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Now, Please welcome Jaune Quick-to-See Smith.
Hello, Leslie. I'm very honored to be here with the Ulrich Museum this evening. Thanks to you and Jana Irwin. Thanks to Norman Akers, kind words. And I'm really delighted to be here.
Jana, do we have, oh, thanks. Jaune, do you want to talk about the work that's featured on the billboard included in this public art project?
Sure, it looks like a frieze, but it's actually 4 lithographs that were done with Mike Sims. And the whole project was one of Joe Zanata's publications. And Joe he lives in Kansas City and has published many artists over the years and continues to do that to this day. And in this case, with these lithographs, Joe had introduced me to his designer's machine. It was a Xerox machine. And I had been going to Kinko's to make Xeroxes and then redraw things and then use those as part of my medium with the lithographs. And you can see here the Byzantine floor in the background behind the rabbit, which represents fecundity. So I was showing that people like to gather in groups together. And you see there's a group of natives and a group of fish, and there, well, there's buffalo, and there are other things in here grouped together. So I have a mixed story here about survival of Native Americans, and in this case, tribe and community, and the Catholic Church kind of go together, because the Catholic Church has helped our numbers immensely, even though we've suffered through many genocides in this country and South America and Mexico. So I created 4 parts of survival that are important to my tribe and other tribes as well. And nature and medicine are 2 things that go together. All of our good medicine comes out of nature. And today, the FDA has something like 75 drugs that Native Americans discovered through the plant life, and that are still used today. And my tribe, we have 6 of the 7 life zones. And so plants are really important in my tribe, and especially for medicine. So I also show a tree of life, a human figure, kind of Picasso-like, emerging from the tree. And then another kind of Picasso-like figure over here playing the flute. And then across the bottom, very faintly, you can see pictographs or pictograms from ledger book in the background across the bottom. So nature and medicine, and we don't realize that a lot of our medicines, our good medicines, come from nature, the natural medicines, and not the ones cooked up with the drug companies. So I use that as part of survival. And knowledge in medicine is another part of our survival for Native people. And one is that we revere our elders. Our elders have wisdom. They may not have book learning, but they have wisdom. And we always refer to them and listen to their advice. Knowledge comes from book learning. And not that there's anything against that, that's important too, but we need both. And we don't always have both in our leadership in this country. And humor is so important. We need humor. It's been part of our survival. all through time. And when you go to a reservation, if you sit down for a meal, there will be much laughter, stories told, sometimes some jokes. So I have a mixed bag of things here, a figure that's upside down, because often humor is something that's upside down and is turning everyday life in backwards, upside down. That's what humor usually is. Jewish people tell stories and they do the same thing. So, so I have a mixed thing here. The train is chasing the Indian people. An early pastel from the early 1990s, and with a lot of pictographs. I did a lot on the park here that is the escarpment that runs along the city of Albuquerque. It's a 17-mile escarpment and has thousands of pictographs in the rocks. And at one point in time, they weren't protected. And a group of artists, including myself, got together to protect them. So I did a lot of drawings and paintings about the pictograph park. The American Landscape is a print that I did with Tamarind at the time of the Iraq War. So you can see a Paul Klee figure down below. I had been in Italy and I have to, no, I'm speaking to my dog. Sorry about that. She can hear my voice and she's at the door. She can see me. No, baby, no. So I'd been in Italy and I'd actually gone into a shop where there were old etchings of Pinocchio. And so I added that because we thought that we heard a lot of information that misled us at the time of the Iraq War. And then of course, the figure at the bottom, the woman's head, was stolen from the Iraqi museum and wasn't recovered. So also the American Landscape has a lot of images here. It's got bots. It has Beethoven in digital language. It has a sandwich, a bicycle wheel. There are a lot of there's a lot of technological things, and there's a crop circle, and of course Encanto to represent the native side of America.
Jaune, before we get further into this, would you mind saying a few words about your early career and how you realized that you wanted to be an artist?
Well, you know, when I was a really little kid, life was pretty difficult. My father he was illiterate and he was a horse trader, but he did a lot of odd jobs and things like that. And it was during the Second World War. So life was difficult for a lot of people, but especially Native Americans were really impoverished. And we truly were that. And my mother was also illiterate at that time. She later got her GED when she was in her 50s. But we didn't have toys, or we didn't have things to play with. We played with moss and rocks and things like that. And I would make up my own games. So when I went to the first grade, we didn't have kindergarten. We lived out in a really rural area. We had moved off of the Nisqually Reservation, where we lived with 2 other families in a 1-room log cabin, and then moved to a place called Black Diamond, Washington. where we lived in a cabin there. And when I went to school, and I was introduced to library paste, which smelled really delicious. It still smells that way to me. And all little Indian kids often smell things and then eat them. It's a way of, I guess, finding out more about them. So I ate the crayons, which were crumbly and didn't taste so good, though they smelled great, ate the library paste, and then we had tempera paint, which actually was gritty and didn't taste very good. But that was my first introduction to art supplies, and I was just smitten with them. And I didn't know that there was such a thing as artist. I didn't know the word and had never heard it. I just knew that that was my favorite thing to do. So it was a little later that I learned there was such a thing as an artist when I started reading books. That's what I wanted to be, what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until I got to junior college and found out from the professor that women couldn't be artists, he said. And but I wasn't the only woman who heard that. Other women, Miriam Shapiro, Lita Albuquerque, had heard a professor say that to them as well. So I know that a lot of other women heard the same thing. And I was in a class with Korean vets. It was all men in my class. I was the only woman. And the professor said at the end of the year, you can draw better than the men, but you can't be an artist. So then I decided maybe I would become an art teacher. It took a long time going to school, taking courses, moving for jobs, raising children. But eventually I came here to New Mexico, and after a tussle with the art department for a couple of years, who said Indians don't go to fine art school, they have to go to art ed. So that was another hurdle I had to get across. But I did. So I likely might have been the first native to graduate from the fine art department here. And, eventually they gave me an honorary doctorate, which was very nice. But anyway, so that's how that went. So, but as I moved along, I wanted to help other Native people here. So I formed a group called the Great Canyon Artists. And, Emmy Whitehorse, my longtime friend, who had gone to school with me, is a very noted, wonderful artist to this day. So it was all worthwhile.
Well, you've been a tremendous leader in that realm, contemporary Native artists. And I know the last time we were on a Zoom together, you mentioned this book that you've put together, a collection or a survey, essentially, of Native American contemporary artists. And it just sounds like a fabulous publication.
Well, it's a book that I've been trying to develop interest in for over 20 years. So I've gone to publishers, museums, other Native writers in trying to get interest for a book on contemporary Native art. If you go to Amazon and you look up contemporary African artists, African American artists, Haitian artists, Mexican American artists, you'll find multiple books. And when you look up contemporary Native art, you may find one or none. So it's a book that's long, long overdue. The Idle-Jord Museum did a book about their collection, but of course that doesn't cover all of contemporary Native America. And we have a lot of enormous amount of young artists coming up today across the country. So these artists are in the hundreds. And the book that Mokna in Santa Fe IAIA published a few years ago, that one I think has 50 artists maybe in it. So, but I want to see a book that has 200 or 300, because we easily have that. They're working, they're teaching, they're professors, and they're just really incredible artists out there. So, I'm hoping that one of these days we get a book. I'm working on it.
Well, we'll look forward to it. And I hope at some point you're able to find a publisher. It seems like there would be a lot more interest in that at this point.
Well, there's certainly more, since Water is Life, since we had, the pipeline, all the attention around the pipeline, and Standing Rock, there's been more interest in Native America since then, and certainly Black Lives Matter has changed the scene for people of color in this country. So that has helped us. And it's not that it always works all the time, because Time magazine just came out with a magazine that had 100 influential people. And they had a Native woman from Brazil, I think it was, and her face was painted and she had feathers in her hair. And they put her in the magazine rather than Joy Harjo or Winona LaDuke or, Deborah Holland, all these women who are making news in this country right now, today, all these Native women that should have been in there as influential people in today's world. And it was a lot of people of color, but no Native American person. So that's a continuing problem with Native Americans, is that we often just get left behind.
Well, I think there are plenty of us out there who are really committed to changing that. So yeah, I think Jana's shifting the PowerPoint to let us know that maybe we should get back to the work for a little while.
This is a model print that I did in Michael McCabe's shop in Santa Fe. Michael is a Navajo master printer, a really wonderful printer, a really wonderful, kind man who prints for a lot of Native Americans here. And I made a mixed blood rabbit because that's an issue these days about being mixed blood and having several tribes or ethnic groups in your bloodlines. So I called it an Indian rabbit, but you can see by his spots, he's a mixed blood. This is a lithograph from the mid-90s. I had been to a conference, and an art historian from Canada sent me a book after we'd been on a panel together about the site in Peterborough site in Canada, where there were a lot of standing rabbits, and that got me interested in standing rabbits. And actually, these are not exactly the same as the Peterborough site, but kind of reminiscent about it. And we kept hearing about 200 years of 200 or 400 years of American history. And so I wanted to make a comment about that. So it's sort of poster-like, and it shows the rabbits going way back in history. My son calls it the hairline. And I ask people to remember to celebrate 40,000 years of American art. And I know it's sort of cheeky the way I the way I say it, because of course it wasn't America at that time. But when you put it that way, it is memorable and people think about it. I've been traveling in the 90s. I'd been traveling with tribal members from my reservation, which is in Western Montana, through Idaho, and then down the Columbia River, because we were going to design a museum, a small museum that housed beadwork and our art on the reservation. So I was traveling with the elders, and in days gone by, my tribe used to go downriver and fish with the river Indians for salmon on the Columbia River. And so one of the elders took us late one evening, way off on a dirt road that you hardly would know was there, and way back on this dirt road, so we could see one of the old fishing platforms, which was moldering away, falling into the water. But there it was. I don't have any photographs. I wish I did have a photograph of it, because they don't do that anymore. But that was a very, I'm sure, very dangerous job, was to have those poles out over the water and be on one of those platforms. You could easily fall or be pulled into the water. But anyway, that meant that we were there with other tribes, maybe not always Salish speakers, Sahabshan speakers, and other tribes that lived along the Columbia River. So I made these kind of maps. I do a lot of maps, but everything is always about landscape. Let me say that. Landscape runs through everything I do. It means that our lives, our bodies are all tied to the land. You know, our bodies come out of the land. If you look at what the mother eats, and then how we're born, and then what we do eat through our lives, and then what we return to, return to this earth, this planet. So my work always revolves around the land in different ways. I mean, I'm thinking about stories or someplace I've traveled or whatever I'm concentrating on. I'll do sometimes a whole series of work. And so in this case, these were, I call plateau maps, with pictographs that you would see on the plateau. There's a huge section of Montana, Idaho, Okanagan up into Canada, and then down into Oregon, called the plateau. And it's a rise in the landscape. And so all of our tribes that are from that area are often referred to as plateau Indians. And even if we spoke a different language, our dances often were alike, our clothing, even today, stick games that we played, gambling games, dances, all that. So anyway, this is about the Plateau Indians. So it's got pictographs that you might come across. There are a lot of cave paintings, paintings on high walls, pictographs on rocks. There's a lot of that kind of thing on the plateau.
I know you've traveled all along in your career, and giving lectures, going to conferences, museum talks, and it hasn't really slowed down for you, has it? It's just lined up now in front of you.
It's just shifted right now to Zoom calls. And what's good about that is that I used to have to get up at like 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning in order to make a 5:30 or a 6 a.m. flight. And it would take me all day to get to the coast and then to get back east, and then have to wait till the next day or teach classes and then give a lecture, and then turn around and get up at 3:30 or 4 o'clock to catch a 6 a.m. flight back here to New Mexico, all for that 1 hour lecture. And now this is so convenient. I can set my computer up and do this in an hour and maybe have 15 minutes preparation before I do it. And then, yeah, and then I can go eat dinner and I can watch the debates. That's the good news here. I mean, so
That's coming up.
yeah, that's, this is actually not too bad to be able to do it this way. This is another painting, again, with a lot of pictographs from, and I called it Alphabet. It's thought that Native Americans didn't have a written language. Everything is always through the eyes of the conqueror or the oppressor. It's that they always try to demean the original people. So you go around the world and you can look at history and you can see, like one time when I was in Poland, they talked about how the Russians came in and how the Germans came in and took their language and a lot of their culture. That's just what happens. So anyway, I was making this painting. I called it Alphabet, and it's sort of tongue in cheek, actually, because there's cuneiform writing around the Great Lakes and in Canada, and of course, the Mayans had big libraries of their codex writing, but that's all gotten overlooked. It's like saying that because we didn't have horses here, or we didn't have horses to pull wagons, that we didn't have the wheels, so we must have been kind of dumb people. I mean, that's kind of been the story that we heard growing up, is that we didn't have a written language, we didn't have a wheel, but there are other circumstances, that so we didn't have a horse, we didn't have oxen, there was no use for a wheel. But when you look at the stones at Machu Picchu, or in any of the Mesoamerican pyramids, and how tightly fitted they are, these were master craftsmen and just absolutely amazing. And the other thing is, the pyramids in Mesoamerica are taller than the pyramids in Egypt. So you could do this. We haven't done this one-upmanship, like the hands up the baseball bat. We should, as Native people, we need to do more of that.
So, go ahead.
This is a painting I did. My sister was a bad alcoholic and an addict, and our early lives were really, really difficult. And then through her lifetime, she sought out relationships that were abusive and everything. So I called this a child within, because in thinking about my sister and her life, she's passed on now, and she was younger than I am. But in thinking about her life, I always thought, inside of there was a child that never grew up, and that always yearned for somebody to comfort her and care for her. So all the little drawings that you see around this figure, and then you see the little skeleton inside of the figure, as though that's the child within. But her life was very difficult for her. So anyway, sometimes I do that, make images. You see a Mickey Mouse hand over here, and I'll mix things together. Sometimes I think of my work is almost fusion, meaning, I mix pop art together with, uh, you know, antiquated or, old pictographs, uh, native art. I go back and forth between
Yeah.
looking at a lot of old beadwork and things like that, um, moccasins, clothing, um, and pictographs, and then mixing it with, you know, pop art, things I cut out of magazines or newspapers. It's kind of a mishmash, I guess.
Well, related to family, I think your son is an artist, correct?
Yes, he is. Yes,
You guys have done some work together, right?
quite a bit, actually. I mean, when he was in high school, I would ask him could he help me? I had a story about spotted owl and clear cutting. So I wanted to put these axes up on the top of the canvas. And I'm not a very good carpenter. So he would come in the studio and help me with that. So it kind of started there. And then he went away to college and he did take art classes. He did get a degree in art. And then he wanted to be, uh, he had a band. He wanted to be a musician. And I think he just kind of wanted to be Mick Jagger, maybe. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's a dream for a lot of young people. So he did that for some years, and then one day he came after work, and I had new ink and a new press that I'd gotten with my Joan Mitchell grant, and he saw what I was doing in the studio, and I said to him, "Do you want to make a print?" And he said, "Sure." And I said, "There's a show in France, and we could, we could send our prints there." So he came every day after work, worked on his print, and then I said to him, "You know, maybe you'd like to go back to graduate school." And he said, "Oh, I think I'm too old." And I said, "Oh no, you're not too old." So I called up my friend Lydia Madrid, who was a professor there, and she said, "I will look out for him if he wants to come to school." So he did. He went back, got his MFA, and now he's the chair of the art department at the Indian Confederated IAIA, which I'm just so proud of. I wanted to teach there my whole life, and now he's teaching there. So that's pretty exciting. But yeah, we're still doing some things. Like right now, we have a set of silverware in a box, and we're going to send them home and have Linda King, our terrific beater, be the part that you would eat, not the handle, but the part that you eat from, to talk about how the government treats poor people in this country, especially Native people. So like they do something like that that looks really good, and yet, you can't eat. You know, it's a whole thing about poverty and food. So we do a lot of projects like that together. And one thing is, he is so gifted, so talented. He's a master craftsman. He can almost like sculpt or build or that. So if I get a brainy idea, then I'll say to him, you know I really would like to do this, but I'm just not sure how to do this. And then, we'll talk about it. He'll figure it out and he'll build something for me. So we kind of like, we each have our own niche here, and then we put it together to come up with a project. And do I ever love, like, two heads and doing some project together? I just really love it. I do.
It sounds like the perfect collaboration. I know we have a few more slides. And I thought maybe before we go into the questions, maybe we'll talk about a little more recent work in the pieces that are left.
So this center of the world is, I've done a couple of maps with showing my reservation as the center of the world, because not everybody, but a lot of people have a place they think of as homeland or home and security and family, and not everybody has that. Native people pretty much have something like that. So, but here we always talk about the Iroquois creation story about the turtle raising its back, and of course it's about the Great Flood, which is the first chapter of the Bible, but it's not from the Bible. It's from Native America. On my reservation, there was the Great Flood also, and Coyote worked with the Matkin, the creator, and helped the people, turned on the lights, meaning, bringing forth the sun, that sort of thing. We all have a creation story, but often when we get together for a panel or a conference, we talk about turtle raising its back, or sometimes we talk about the whole country, all of America, as Turtle Island. You hear that a lot when Native Americans give a talk or, are in a meeting or something. So I made this painting called The Center of the World, and you see turtle in the center, and then going around it, there's Rabbit the Trickster, there's something from Picasso, a drawing down here reminiscent of Andy Warhol, and then Hanson's white bread. You see often on the reservations, you make your bologna sandwich with no mustard and no mayo, just Hanson's white bread. That's a reservation sandwich. And there's some Walt Disney. There's all kinds of stuff, wallpaper, newspaper, prints that you might see on a woman's dress at powwow that all surround turtle here. So it becomes the center of the world. A trade canoe with bison. And of course, those are just the skulls. And they used to, in the 1800s, the government would hire sharpshooters or even people who were vacationers and just wanted to shoot something. And they would ride on a train and shoot out the train windows at the herds of bison. And the idea was if they got rid of the bison, those of us who were dependent on the buffalo for food, they would get rid of us at the same time. It was always plans for genocide in some way. So I had seen these old photographs of bison skulls, like, I don't know, 30 feet high. I don't know. They were huge piles, and there were photographs of them piled up on the prairie in places. And so many of our tribes, including mine, were kind of left to starve. And we wound up at Fort Missoula with wormy beef and moldy flour. That's where our fry bread comes from, the moldy flour, that kind of food. Times were really tough. And when I look back at my family and I look back at my ancestors coming through these times, the fact that I'm here, actually, I am a miracle that I am here. And I'm sure that Jewish people feel that way too, because when they talk about their family members, who went to the death camps, I'm sure that they feel that they are a miracle to be here. And we feel that same way too. So I've been using a lot of trade canoes and trading things back, you could say. But here are the bison skulls piled in this canoe. And of course, the trade canoes came up from St. Louis upriver into Montana, and they had smallpox blankets smeared with smallpox, which was another form of genocide to try to get rid of us. And somebody told me the other day, they looked that up, and on the web, there are articles that say, oh, that's not a true story. And what I'm finding out is that the web and someone or groups of some people are writing things on the computer, refuting all these old stories about the genocide and all the different ways the government had of getting rid of us. And they're saying, oh, those are exaggerated. Oh, they're not true. Oh, the Indians made them up. But I can tell you that my father, who was born in 1901, told me a story about seeing the elder men when he was a kid growing up who had lost their hair. And of course, Indian people don't go bald. They don't lose their hair, at least in those days. Now they do with mixed blood, but in those days they didn't. And he was telling me that smallpox blankets had come, and that so many of our tribal members had died from that. So it's a miracle that we got through that. It's a miracle that I'm here. It's a miracle that, my son and my grandchildren are here. So I see it that way. So I use the trade canoes. I've got one that Neil and I made together that's at the Heard Museum right now, that's filled with fry bread, which of course has caused a lot of heart attacks and high blood pressure, because it's loaded with grease, it's deep fried, it's tasty, it's really delicious, but it's not so healthy.
Well, we have a comment here from Linda Duke, who, as you know, is the director of the Beach Museum of Art. And she's adding that artist Maya Lin has also posted photos of the piles of bison skulls on her What is Missing site.
Oh, and why is she posting that?
She has a website that documents things that are missing from us, and she has an image of that immense, unbelievable, famous photograph of the bison skulls. Yeah.
The part that people don't talk about, though, is the starving people that starved from those immense sites with the skulls. But the background story to that is about how our families, were starving to death. So Tamarind has a program, and Diana Gaston, who's the director of Tamarind, had contacted me about the Collectors Club, and every year they do a project where they work with an artist, and they I think do something like 100 lithographs, and they sell them at a very modest price. Usually in the past it's been 500 and 600, and they keep it secret whoever the artist is, and then you find out, but you don't get to see the lithograph either until it's published. So Diana had asked me if I would work with Valkyrie Remling, the master printer, and so we had to figure out how to do that, because I have difficulty with a low immune system from some past physical difficulties. Anyway, we talked about it, and then decided that she wanted me to use a stone, and she put it in her car, and then brought a rolling cart, brought it to the front door of the house, and then my son met them at the front door and brought it back in the studio. So I had that, and I had 2 aluminum plates, and then all the materials that go with it. So through the summer months, I was sending her notes on the computer or calling her on the phone, and she would come by and drop off some supplies. Anyway, I had seen William Wegman had put a blanket over one of his dogs just so you could see the outline of, one of his dogs. I don't know if it was Fay Ray or Ray Ray, um, because it was an older image. And then I found another image of Hockney's that had a little boy looking at someone under a blanket. And kind of ghost-like. And the blanket had a separation, like apparently it was folded in a certain way. Anyway, I used that as, kind of a guide here. And I had been fooling around with this image anyway. In the 90s, I had made a big charcoal drawing of Coyote under a blanket. And also because we Native people have been treated as though we're invisible, like we're not here. Oh, just like the Time magazine, like I told you about Time magazine, we're left out of there. So if you see a list of ethnic groups, sometimes we're not even there. And so I made this image of Coyote, our creation story at Flathead, and with the blanket over the top as though we were hidden. But the fact that you could see the outline of Coyote meant that we were always there. And really, you could really see us, but they treated us like we were invisible. And so then I took that same image after seeing Hockney and William Wegman, and actually Christo, who wrapped things. I had that image. I had some others that I found, and I said, oh, this is really good because here all these artists have taken something and covered it with a blanket. And so in this case, I decided that, okay, we've gone into quarantine. So Coyote's in quarantine. Coyote has a blanket over him. We're supposed to wear a mask. We're supposed to wear, a hood thing. And so I thought that was just kind of appropriate for what was going on. And in the ghost dance days was a time during the really big genocidal period when they were killing the buffalo and everything. A lot of our tribes up north were along the High Line, between the US and Canada, were dancing. And Jack Wovoka had said that if we danced a lot, maybe the buffalo would come back and all the white people would go away. So they were making shirts. They no longer had buffalo hide to make them made them out of flour sacks, and drew pictographs on there. So the morning star was there, dragonflies, thunderbirds, all kinds of things. So what I did on this, I put the dragonflies over here flying down, and then you can see the morning star. I mean, there's only one morning star, which is Venus, but I made 4 up there. Flatheads always do everything in 4s. So like if I go to the grocery store to get, some green, let's say green beans in the can, I have to get 4. I can't get 5. So when I buy pencils, I can get 4 or 8. But that's not just me. Other tribes do that too, because one time I was at Bozeman at the university, and I was in a class with a whole group of Indian students, but there were other students there as well, white students, and we had to play a guessing game with something. So the answer I picked was like 12 or 16. The Indians guessed it every time because we think of everything in 4s. And I know for Chinese people, the number 4 is a dangerous. It's a dangerous number. They won't live in a house that has a 4 in the street address, and things like that. It's interesting because it's a cultural thing.
So I'm going to try to get a couple questions in from the audience. Penelope Taylor is asking, something that I should have asked you right away in the beginning of our discussion about your son is, what is his name?
Oh, Neil Ambrose Smith.
So I'm sorry.
And his Indian name is Inuxuis, because one year when we were at the Medicine Lodge ceremonies, we used to go there every year up at Badger Creek. My cousin was married to a LaFramboise, and a Blackfeet woman. And we would go to those ceremonies. And that particular year, the men had seen a buffalo that had gotten out of this white rancher's, out of his fields. And they hurried and shot the buffalo and dressed it out, put it in the back of the pickup truck. And instead of eating beef, that summer we had a real buffalo feast. And the Neil at that time didn't have an Indian name. And they always tell us, if we don't have an Indian name, then the Creator won't recognize us when we die and we cross over. And so we want to go where the Indian people go. So the men lifted Neil up in the center pole of the Medicine Lodge at the top, where he had to tie the buffalo tail up at the very top of the lodge, of the Sun Lodge. And that's how he got his name. Mike Swims Under and Molly and George Kicking Woman named him Inuxuis, or buffalo tail, because of that. So that was a really wonderful experience. Anyway, that's his name.
What a wonderful story. So another question, Catherine, and I'm so sorry, I'm just going to destroy your last name, please forgive me. Schlajek is asking, is there a particular meaning to lost wax process in tribe community?
She's talking about Navajo people, because they're the ones who use the lost wax. And I think one of the reasons is because they have no electricity. So they can't use like regular jewelers, saws or grinders or anything. And the lost wax means that they can do it way out in the outback, and without those kinds of things. They learned it from the Spanish.
Well, are there any other questions? I know, Jean, you're really wanting to watch the debates. I'm sure we have a lot of other people out there in the audience who are.
Well, if there are questions that come to you after we leave, if you have them, I will answer them later. If you send them to me, I will answer them if they put their email there. I would do that. Sometimes people do have, and they think of it at the time, and then, then they're, and then later say, oh, I wish I would have asked that. But I'd be happy to do that.
Sounds great. Well, we're so thrilled to have you here, and it's just been a pleasure to work with you on putting this together. I thank everyone for joining us this evening, and have a great night. We hope to see you soon, and thanks so much.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you so much. I really appreciated this. And thank you to all the people who joined us. Yeah.
Thank you.